Hello everybody and welcome. In this video I show you how the doodles I use in my videos are made and why they look the way they do. First we take a look at Doodle Standard, the guys you know from almost every video. And second we take a look at Doodle Plus. This is a little more advanced style. And third, there's a little speed drawing style section in which I explain how you can draw Doodle Plus style yourself. Equipment. My drawing tablet is a Cintiq 13 HD Creative, and as a drawing software I use BlackInk. So it's nothing fancy, it's pretty basic. I wanted a solid entry-level tablet that I can draw on directly, and BlackInk practically inspired me to the Doodle Plus style. It is impossible not to enjoy yourselves drawing with it. Just trying out all the basic brushes provides us hours of fun. Brushes. The drawing style isn't that complex, so I use one brush 90% of the time, to be honest, with little adjustments here and there. I wanted it to be kind of a hybrid between the pencil and the calligraphy brush. The pre-mates you can usually find are somewhat of a bad calligraphy pen. And my brush does one thing in two ways: increase its size with pressure and with the angle of the pen. Style. Doodle Standard. A big inspiration for me are the XKCD webcomics. I like that the drawings are very simple, yet are able to deliver a lot of information. And I wanted to keep that idea and add my own flavor to it. For starters, I like to draw in a calligraphy kind of way. All the lines look like a brush stroke writing a kanji, and most of the times I try to avoid straight lines, even when drawing stuff like a TV. The idea to distinguish characters through their hairstyle or headgear I adopted from XKCD. What I added are the manga or anime facial expressions. I think they complement the simple drawing style perfectly, because you can immediately understand the emotion. And that is very important to me, because I use the doodles as a third channel, besides the talking and the text, to deliver information. And if they'd be too complex, the information would get lost or there'd even be a distraction. When it comes to color, I tend to use only black and white spectrum, with the exception of some highlights. And what makes the style look alive is that I make use of a lot of different opacity or transparency values. So instead of choosing a gray color, I use a black color with a high transparency. At first it seems they are the same color, but the difference is I can change the color of the transparency one by drawing over it again. And this way it is possible to easily create gradations or shades. But transparency is tricky. You cannot simply add the values and get the base color, so applying 2 layers of 50% won't give you 100%. It is really something you have to get a feeling for. For example, at some point there's a limit of layers you can apply and the color won't change anymore, but still stays transparent. Doodle Plus. Doodle Plus uses the doodle base, but features highly detailed parts that are the characteristics for a character, like armor or helmet or weapons, etc. And this one is my latest work from my friend Sir Winter. And as you might see, it is heavy on the shading and it looks very detailed. But that is in kind of experimental state, because it doesn't have any outer lines I usually use, and it's white on black instead of black on white background. Instead, I will show you how a typical Doodle Plus is done, like this one. Side note. I still am a novice when it comes to drawing. Pretty much everything I know is self-taught. Please keep that in mind. And here we are in our BlackInk. As you can see, usually I use some kind of a reference that I can draw over. It really helps me to understand how things work, how things are drawn. Let's start with the outer lines. We use a standard brush with 100% opacity and a medium size. What I did here is adjust the smoothness. It causes that the line is dragged a little bit behind the tip of the pen, so it is easier to draw longer lines. And then we start to draw all the outer lines. With Bastion here, it's actually not that hard to distinguish what line should be visible and what not, because he's already drawn in a cartoonish style. So basically we have to separate all the areas with different colors and different contrast levels. Because we are only using shades of grey, we are somewhat limited in the amount of color we can use. And therefore it is very important that we can distinguish every detail in every area from another. As you can see, some lines I draw a couple of times, because I really wanted him to be perfect and have this right amount of swoop. And here we are, finished almost with all the outer lines. And as you can see, without the reference picture, it just looks like a simple drawing of bastions without any shadings. Now we start to draw the details. And for this, we will lower the opacity a little bit. I chose a level of 50%, but as you can see, it wasn't enough, so I just draw a second layer of it. And now it gets interesting. We start with our first big area of shading. We add an additional drawing layer and set our opacity to about 25%. And now let's go nuts. And here we have our first problem. My brush strokes were too short and I had to draw over the same area a couple of times, creating those dull spots we were talking about earlier. To resolve this problem, we choose a lower opacity level and use larger brush strokes. That is better, but compared to our reference, it is not dark enough. So let's lower the opacity again and apply another layer. And now for the little highlight strip on his head. To do this, we choose white with a very low opacity. And after we're finished, we can just erase everything beyond our border lines because of the second layer. You can do this for every area you want to draw, but sometimes it can be a little bit of work adding the layers and erasing all the stuff you don't want to. I decided not to use any more additional layers, but that comes with some kind of problems. Because if we are too careful not to draw over the border lines, we might miss some corners and edges, as you will see. So now let's go for the dark parts on its neck area. Some areas are even so dark that I decided to go for 100% opacity to set some contrast. And from this point on, I can say, let the experimentation begin. It's all about choosing an opacity level and see if it fits the contrast, if it fits the color. If it's not dark enough, we apply another layer. And if we get those dull spots, we will adjust our opacity level. The wonderful thing about the style is that we can go back to areas we don't like this little part on the neck. It is just too bright. So we just fix it by choosing a very low opacity level and just draw over it until we like it. At the beginning, and still even for me, it is a lot of trial and error. Take a look at the reference, what it's supposed to look like. Compare it to what we've just drawn. Does it fit? Does the contrast fit? Does the saturation fit? If not, then adjust it. Did we over adjust it? If we create too many dull spots, then just delete that part and go over it again. It is really learning how to handle this transparency, this opacity thing. Yeah, and that is pretty much everything I have to say. The rest is actually quite self-explanatory and uses everything I told you so far. So please enjoy the rest of the video and keep an eye out on those opacity levels.